Welcome back. We're continuing our journey through the Yellow Book, and today we're tackling a chapter that's right in the middle of a huge public debate, Brazil's banking oligopoly. And, this topic has been absolutely thrust back into the spotlight because of a major scandal, forcing a really tough conversation about the future of finance in the country.
So what happened? Well, the recent arrest of Banco Master's owner, Daniel Vorcaro, in connection with a multi-billion-real fraud scheme, it just sent shockwaves through the market. And this case is such a stark reminder that just trying to change the system doesn't automatically fix everything. The risks involved are very, very real.
And this whole event really gets to the heart of the dilemma that the Yellow Book tackles head-on. You see, while shaking up the established order definitely has its risks, the book argues that leaving the current system untouched, while that guarantees one thing and one thing only: persistent inefficiency.
Okay, so let's really dive into the problem that the Yellow Book lays out, starting with the just absolutely staggering scale of Brazil's banking concentration.
Get this, just 4 major banks. We're talking Banco do Brasil, Caixa, Itaú, and Bradesco. They are responsible for almost 60% of all credit operations in the entire country. Just 4.
And hold on, because if we add the 5th largest player, Santander, into that mix, that number just skyrockets to over 80% of the entire market. I mean, this isn't a market, it's a fortress, and it's controlled by just a handful of giants.
And this chart really puts it into perspective, doesn't it? When you compare it to other major economies like the United States or China, Brazil's banking concentration is just in a whole different league. It's an outlier.
Now, this didn't happen overnight. Oh no, this was built over decades. Every single major crisis, from the Great Depression all the way to the hyperinflation of the 80s, it just kept reinforcing this idea that bigger banks must be safer banks, pushing more and more customers and capital toward the giants. So here's the crucial point. Brazil has historically made a choice. It has prioritized the safety of its biggest institutions over any kind of real market competition. And yeah, this has created a system that's stable, for sure, but it's also incredibly rigid and totally out of touch with what the economy actually needs to grow. So the big question is, how does the Yellow Book propose we open the gates to this fortress? Well, the first major proposal is a really radical break from the past, actively encouraging foreign banks to come on in. And the Yellow Book doesn't just point out the problem, it actually maps out a solution. It identifies all the current barriers, things like ridiculously high capital requirements that are basically designed to protect the incumbents, and it proposes a concrete fix, streamline the whole entry process for large, solid international banks. The whole goal is to finally inject some real competition from players who are not afraid to shake things up.
All right, next up, the Yellow Book turns its attention to 2 of the absolute biggest players inside that fortress, Brazil's massive public banks.
The proposal here is, well, it's truly transformative. For Caixa, it's all about getting back to its original social mission. And for Banco do Brasil, it's about becoming a much more agile, competitive company, one that's free from all that political interference. And get this, their non-core assets would be sold off, but not to the existing giants. No, they'd be sold to new competitors, which would fuel even more market dynamism.
Now, the third proposal goes after one of the heaviest burdens on Brazilian businesses and families, that incredibly high banking spread. And that's basically the difference between what banks pay for money and what they turn around and charge you for it.
At over 31%, Brazil's banking spread was the 3rd highest in the entire world in 2023. And let's be clear, this is not just a number. It's a massive wall that makes credit prohibitively expensive for pretty much everyone.
Now, what's really fascinating when you look at this chart is how that spread is actually broken down. I mean, sure, default risk, the chance that people won't pay back their loans, is a big factor. But just look at that slice for taxes. The government takes a huge piece of the pie before the banks even see a penny of profit.
And so the book's solution is as direct as it is powerful. Just get rid of the IOF, the tax on financial operations, on all credit. I mean, boom, that would immediately remove the government's heavy cut and directly lower the price of credit for consumers and businesses alike.
But here's the thing. All of these proposals, welcoming foreign banks, reforming public ones, cutting taxes, they all require one thing: a completely new approach to risk. And that is the bigger, more fundamental challenge the book addresses: Brazil's entire relationship with economic risk.
To really get why Brazil's interest rates are so high, you have to think like an investor for a second. Okay, option A, you invest in the United States. It's a solid, stable economy, very low risk, so your return will be safe, but it's going to be modest, maybe around 4.5%. Now, option B, Brazil. It's a less predictable economy, right? So to convince you to take on that higher risk, it has to offer you a much higher reward, something around 14.75%.
And then you have the extreme, option C, an even riskier economy, like Turkey. To attract any investment at all, it has to offer just staggering returns, like 46%, just to compensate you for that massive risk.
The relationship is crystal clear. The higher the perceived risk, the higher the return has to be. And that's a core reason for Brazil's high interest rates. They're a symptom of deeper problems, like high public debt, legal uncertainty, and low productivity.
Ultimately, what the Yellow Book is arguing is that you can't just fix things like high interest rates in isolation. To tackle these surface-level problems, you have to have the courage to reform the deep, structural problems of the entire economy.
And this brings us right back to where we started. The Yellow Book's proposals, they acknowledge the risks. We see them in cases like Banco Master. But it forces us to ask a much tougher question. Is Brazil ready to accept the short-term turbulence of real reform to unlock the long-term benefits of a truly competitive and dynamic economy?